Hey everyone, how you doing? Maybe you own a truck and your phone's dead and you need to charge your phone. Well, I tell you what, it would be good if you had a power supply in the back of the bed. So check this out. We open that up and we have two USBs and we're charging the phone. Or maybe your daughter's basketball is deflated. Well, you know what? You take this, you open this up and you have a 12-volt outlet. Now you inflate the basketball. You can install that in any truck. I'm going to be installing it in a Ford Maverick. So why don't you come with me, spend a few minutes, and I'll teach you how it's done. And it's not this truck specific, it's any truck. Oh, and by the way, this is Fred from Fred's Garage. Thanks for coming back. Spend a few moments with me. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is you got to get yourself a switch panel. This is the one I chose. There's thousands of different variations of this. The only thing you want to keep in mind is you want to get a marine grade, boat grade switch panel. So it's water resistant, okay? And you can get it in any kind of setup you want. You see this one here, it has a double USB with a water resistant cover. It got a 12-volt socket. It's got a switch that turns on and off the panel. I want to have a switch because I don't want this on when I don't need it on. I don't need power back here. I don't need rain, water, whatever. I just only want it on when I want it on, okay? And on this side, it has a voltmeter. Now, I don't need a voltmeter, okay? The truck has a voltmeter, so I know what that is. This power source in the back's only going to stay on for about an hour, hour and a half after you turn the truck off. And the computer in the truck's not going to let the battery die with this on. So I don't need a voltmeter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this voltmeter. I purchased an extra switch. And I'm going to put this switch here. And this switch is going to control my bed lights because I'm going to put some bed lights in here. I'll show you how this works. So we had to buy these extra switches. Don't worry, all of this is going to be in my description below with all the tools and the parts and everything we need. So make it as easy for you as possible. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do is pick your switch. Step 2 is you're going to need to find a location for it, okay? Ford has made it really easy with these panels. Being that this is a XL, it doesn't have the power source already. So I am going to place this switch panel right in here, okay? If you don't want to place it here, if you're worried about it getting damaged, you can always put it inside the cubby. Let me show you. If you're worried about damaging your switches or whatever you have in the bed, you can always put the switch panel inside the cubby, okay? I would put it on this side here, being that the power strip is here. But you can put it inside, it would be in there, and then you can just close it up with this. Nobody would even know it was there, and it'll be out of the elements. So that's another option on where to put it. But in my case, we're going to put it on that side. So let me show you how we do that. Oh, and one more thing. This panel doesn't have what's called Carling switches. Carling switches are the big boat switches you see. I have them in my boat. They're really great switches for their purpose. But the problem with Carling switches is they stick out about as far as my finger width. So with those switches sticking out that far, it's not going to be long before you hit that switch with a suitcase, with a 2x4, with a bike, and you're going to rip that switch off. And now you're going to have a broken switch and you're going to have to do it all again. I'll show you what the Carling switch looks like in this photo. But I wanted switches that were as recessed as possible. And that's why I picked this panel. These are Carling switches, and they stick out way too far. You'll rip the covers right off them. Alrighty, so your truck's going to have 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. All you're going to need is a 10mm socket or wrench to get those bolts off, okay? I've already changed mine, done other things to it, so I have different bolts. So I'm going to take this panel off, and then we're going to show you how to hook the switch up. But remember, you just need a 10mm socket or wrench to get those bolts out. Alrighty, so once you get those 4 bolts out, all you got to do is peel this panel off, and there she is. Okay? And we're going to find a location for where we're going to want to put our switch. Alright, so I'm going to want my switch to sit right in this corner, tucked in, just like that. So I'm going to make a template, and then we're going to cut it out, okay? Alright, so I placed some masking tape here. I'm going to take my switch panel, and I'm going to put it exactly where I want it. And I'm going to trace my switch panel with a pen. So we're just going to trace it. And then what I'm going to do is mark my 4 holes. And I'm going to end up with something that looks like this. Okay? Now, if I look at the back of my switch panel, I know that where the holes are, I'm going to have little recesses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recess in a little bit where the hole is. I'd rather have more material and cut it again than cut too much, and then I can't do anything with it, okay? Then I'm going to leave the little crease, connect my corners, and as I said, I would rather leave more material and cut it out some more than cut out too much and then have no place to go with it, okay? And this section here, you can cut out with whatever you have, okay? You can cut it out with a jigsaw. You can cut it out with a razor knife. Just be very careful if you use a razor knife. And you could cut it out with a little hand saw, okay? Whatever you have to cut this out, you use that. Some people I've seen take all these switches out and they use hole saws. And they use a hole saw to make the hole for the switches. That's another option. The only problem with that option for me is I don't want to take all the switches apart. And 2, a lot of people don't have hole saws. People will have some sort of cutting device to cut that out, okay? So let me get my jigsaw, because that's what I'm going to use, and we're going to cut that out. So I'm going to use a jigsaw, okay? And I'm going to cut that opening out. And I got 2 blocks of wood just to rest this on top so I don't cut into my bed or anything. And I have a drill because I need to make a starter hole. So you see this spot here and you're going to say, how am I supposed to cut in that? I'm going to show you. First thing you're going to do is make a starter hole. We're going to grab the drill. We're going to put it in a corner and we're going to drill a hole. And we're going to drill a hole. And make sure that my hole is bigger than the jigsaw blade and it doesn't go past the line, okay? So now I'm going to use my jigsaw blade and we're going to stick it right inside that hole and we're going to cut it, but we're going to cut it on the wood. Now this jigsaw blade's very loud, so I'll put the volume down in this section so you won't have to hear it. And that's it. We have an open hole. So before I clean up this mess and deburr it, I want to make sure my switch panel fits in it. And we're going to put the switch. It's snug, but it's going to fit perfectly just like that. And that's where I want it, okay? Now, we're going to use this razor knife to clean up these edges. And if she's a little tight, you can always use this to sculpt it a little bit the way you need it, okay? So let's do that. We're going to peel this tape off. And we're going to clean up the edges with that razor knife, okay? And don't worry if you happen to cut it a little bit big, because I'm going to use some I personally am going to use some gasket maker to make it as waterproof as possible. And that'll fill up any little mistakes you might make, okay? But just when you use a razor knife, be very careful. You could hurt yourself with this. I'm sure you're saying, hey, your fingers are too close to that razor knife. Trust me. I've cut myself hundreds of times with this razor knife. All right, let's pop her back in, see how she fits. Perfect. Now let's look at the back. Perfect. All right. Now we're going to get rid of the voltmeter, put in another switch for the lights, and let's do that before we mount her. All right. So that was the hardest part, was cutting that hole. But now you've done that, so we're on to the next step. So you want to keep the voltmeter, you keep the voltmeter. That's up to you. I don't want it. I want to switch to turn on and off the lights. So we're going to look at the back. If you look at the back here, all you have is a negative and a positive that comes from the switch, okay? So we're going to cut this positive line. That's the only thing you got to do is cut this positive wire, this loop positive wire, and I'll show you. The way this switch is wired now, this switch turns on that voltmeter, okay? I don't need that. I want this switch to turn on the USB and turn on the 12-volt power source, but I don't want it to turn on my future switch, which is going to be the lights. So I'm going to get a snip. I have already done mine, but I'm going to get a snip and I'm going to cut the loop right here. We're going to cut it right there. And then we're going to take this off. Okay? Save that for the future. You might need it for something. Now we have our grounds. The ground has a loop. We're going to keep the ground loop, okay? Because I still need ground to go to my new switch. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the voltmeter. So we're going to take the positive off the voltmeter. And this positive now is a standalone positive, okay? So this positive is going to go in the middle of whichever switch you're going to use to turn this on. So I'm going to use the inside switch to turn on the 12 volts and the USB, okay? The inside switch. So all I did, just so everybody's aware, is we cut it, and I'm going to move it over to the middle of the new switch, okay? So I cut it and I moved it over to the middle of the new switch because that's the on and the off. So now that positive, when I click the switch on, that positive is going to run to the USB and it's going to run to the 12 volts, okay? The grounds we're going to keep. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove this voltmeter. Very easy. You just untwist it right here. There's a nut. You untwist it. Take the nut off. Voltmeter comes right out. Save the voltmeter. I might put it on my Sea-Doo. So that's what you end up with, okay? And here's the new switches. The new switches had to be pushed into this thing they came with it, this little holder. But here's the switches. And if you look at the back of the switch, it has the same nut, okay? And I want my on and off to be in the same direction as this on and off, okay? So I'm not really sure what the line and the circle means. Maybe somebody can leave it in the comment for me. But for me, the circle's going to be on, the line's going to be off. So I'm going to put this switch in the exact same way, okay? Very easy. And I'm going to put the nut, we're going to place the nut in the back, tighten it back up. And before you tighten it up, just make sure it's nice and even the way you want it, okay? So get the switch nice and even, up and down the way you need it. And we're going to tighten that up. Perfect. Now let's go back to the back, okay? Perfect. So now my two offs are on the top and my two ons are on the bottom. This one here is for the power source. This one here is going to be for my bed lights, okay? Now let's go back to the back. Remember, we never cut the loop on the negative, okay? So the ground is going to go right up here. There's the ground. We're going to click her in, okay? Our positive from the truck's going to go on the bottom, and the middle is going to go to the bed lights. So positive from the truck on the bottom, middle out to the bed lights. On, off, okay? Let's mount this on the panel. Okay, so let's put the switches in the panel. And there they are. Perfect. Okay? The switches come with a bag with 4 screws, 1 for each corner. So let's screw those in. Those are real easy. Okay, I'm going to put the screw in there, hold everything together, and then we're going to screw it in with our drill bit. And it's easy plastic. She'll screw right in, okay? Don't have to go too tight. And then I always like doing the opposite corner. So we're going to come down here. We're going to hold it, and we're going to screw her in. Okay? So now you just have to do all 4. Now that you have all 4, let's talk about wiring. All right, let's talk about wiring it. Ford was nice enough to give all of us one of these. This is a wiring harness that goes to this 12-volt power source right here, okay? So let me show you this harness. You should have received one of these harnesses with your Maverick, okay? Mine was in the glove box. If you did not receive this harness, I am going to show you a close-up, and I'll post a picture of the Ford order number so you can go to the dealership and get one, or maybe find one online, okay? There you go. That's the Ford order number, NZ6T12663. So we have this harness. All we need is a little screwdriver. And on top of this here, there's a little knob. We're going to pop that out. And out comes this panel that has the plug. The plug has a push pin right here. You're going to push that in and she comes right off, okay? And on our switch panel, there's only 2 things you have to hook up. We're going to run this ground to the black wire on this harness. So this ground to the black wire on this harness. We're gonna wire this to 2 positive female ends that are gonna go to this switch. I'll show you. So my switches came with wires. Here's the 2 positives. These are what are called female ends, female plugs, okay? These 2 positives are gonna plug into the bottom. Show you on this. I'm gonna plug into the bottom of the switch, okay? So we have the ground on the top, the source, what's called the load, wherever it's going in the middle, and the positive coming in on the bottom. And we're going to use this other one, and we're going to use this other one to do the same thing on this switch, okay? And now we have independent positives going to each switch, okay? You can loop, I guess, the 2 positives together if you only want to run 1 positive. That's an option for you. But since these already had the female ends on them, I'm just going to keep these 2 together and then run that to the positive side of this harness. And then run that through here and plug it into the port. And we are all done with this part of the play. Don't worry. The panel, the switches, the tools, everything will be in the description in the bottom of this video, okay? And this is going to be a 2-part video. The first part is just doing this, because maybe this is all you want. Maybe you just want to put this in and you're happy. The second part of this video is going to be me wiring the... I'm going to wire a light here, like it comes from the factory, and 2 lights underneath this rail. So when I flick this switch here, this light comes on, and these 4 lights will come on, okay? This video is only on the panel switch. If you would like to install the lights, then look for video number 2. I'll put a link in the description for that also. Okay, let's talk about wiring. So we have our 2 female ends, okay? And what I'm going to do is I really don't need them that long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them down here. Oh, let's talk about this. This is called a wire crimping tool, okay? This is a wire crimp. There's multiple ones of these, and I will put inexpensive ones in the description for people who don't own a pair of these. And what you do is you put your wire inside the butt connector. You put this in the appropriate size, and then you squeeze it, and what that does is it crimps the butt connector to the wire. Now, a lot of people right now are saying, who doesn't know about crimping? Well, let me tell you a story. Just a quick story. I had a coworker one time, and I explained to him precisely how to wire his kayak for an electric trolling motor in the back. Then he takes it out, everything's working good, and then he says to me, "Hey, Fred, the trolling motor just stopped working in the middle of the water." I said, "How is that possible? Did you check the battery? Did you check the wires?" He checked everything. And what he did was he put the wire in here, like so, but he never crimped it with the crimping tool. And I said to him, "Did you crimp it?" And he says to me, "Crimp it? What do you mean, crimp it? What does that mean?" I replied, "What do you mean? What do I mean? You have to crimp this." So the reason I am explaining this tool and putting this tool in the description is a lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people have never done it, and I assumed that they did. So I'm going to explain this exactly how to do it. These crimping tools, they range in all kinds of prices. And the one in the description is the least expensive one I could find. If you want to spend more for a snap-on one like this one, feel free. But at least you'll be able to crimp this wire, okay? Now let's get back to the wiring. All right, so we got one wire. What we're going to do is use this tool, and we're going to strip away about 1/4 inch of insulation from the wire, okay? And you're going to end up like so. It's about, let's say about 1/4 inch. And then we're going to take the other wire, and we're going to strip about 1/4 inch. Now you want to make sure that you use the stripper that correlates with the wire, okay? To make the stripping come out easy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 wires, and I'm just going to twist them together. Twist, 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 twist. Okay? Now I'm going to get my butt connector, and I'm going to place my butt connector in there, making sure, watch this, making sure that this copper part of the wire goes into the butt connector. Okay, so it's in there. So I know that the copper part of the wire is right here. I'm going to grab my crimping tool. I'm going to use the appropriate section. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to squeeze it. Squeeze it as hard as I can. Now these 2 wires are crimped inside this metal connector in here. Okay? They're crimped. And now on this side, I am going to place the positive wire. Ford has already stripped the insulation for you, so we're going to take that off. I'm going to twist it, and I'm going to place the positive wire into the opposite side of the crimp, making sure that my insulation is all the way in so I know the wire is inside. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my crimping tool. What I'm going to do is grab my crimping tool again, and we are going to crimp this with the appropriate size. Okay, and we're going to squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it. And now we have a perfect connector. that's not waterproof. But these connectors that came with the switch have what's called shrink wrap. These ends are shrink wrap. So I'm going to get a heat source. Could be a heat gun, could be a lighter. In my case, I'm going to use a lighter, and we're going to shrink these. So just hold them there, and you'll see, not too close because you don't want to burn them. You'll see it's sucking in around the wire, okay? And we're going to do the same thing to this side. And you'll see, you see her coming in, she's sucking in around the wire. You can use like a lighter from a cigarette lighter if you want. And that's it. Don't do the mistake and touch it. For some reason, a lot of people want to touch it now, and then you burn your fingers. Now, on the negative side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get the appropriate side, which this is probably a 16 gauge wire. We're going to stick that in there. It's an 18 gauge wire. Stick it in the appropriate side, leave about a 1/4 inch, and just pull the insulation off. Twist the wire. Grab your butt connector. Put the wire in the butt connector so the insulation is all the way up against the metal connector in the middle, and crimp it. Now you have a nice crimp. And if we look on the panel, it came with this nice big long ground wire, which I don't need. So I'm going to cut the ground wire down here. I am going to strip the ground wire. I'm going to tighten the ground wire. I'm going to get my negative wire, place it on the negative switch panel wire, push it all the way in, and I'm going to crimp it. And I'm going to crimp it right over where the bare wire is. Not in the middle, right on the edge. And now we have 2 connected grounds. And we're going to shrink wrap it. And we're going to just heat that up, moving the fire so you don't burn the wire, so you don't burn anything. Going all the way around. And that'll make it water resistant. None of this stuff's going to be waterproof, but, and there you go. And remember, you're just going to want to touch it and squeeze it. Don't do it. Okay, so now these 2 positive ends, go on the bottom of the switch. Okay, so one goes right here. It's positive to the switch that controls these 2, and one goes right here. What's positive to the switch that controls those 2. And what I like to do is I like to wire tie my switches together. I don't want the weight on the butt connectors, so I am going to place a little wire tie right there. So I have my wire tie. I'm going to feed it through here. I'm going to put the main harness through there, feed it through there. I'm going to put the main harness there, and we're going to wire tie this together here, okay? So this way here, the weight of the harness is not pushing on the butt connectors, okay? We alleviated the weight. And then I'm going to cut this little tag end off. So you might be asking, how come you didn't run a fuse? Shouldn't you run a fuse? I don't need to. If Ford didn't supply me with this fused harness, I would run a 15 amp fuse here, okay? If I was running it into the tail lights or into the trailer hitch power source, I would definitely fuse it here, okay? And that's for anybody who does not have a Maverick that's watching this video. That is what I would do. I would run it into the positive of the tail light, or personally, I would run it into the positive on the trailer hitch, because there's a constant positive going down to the trailer hitch, okay? But because Ford gave us a fused panel, we're going to plug this into that, okay? Now, let me show you how we feed this through here to come out here, okay? Let me show you what it looks like in there. It's just a big opening, okay? Right here, you'll see this huge opening right here, okay? Just see the screwdriver's pointing at the huge opening. That huge opening comes out right on the other side. So we're going to feed the main wire. We're going to feed this main wire into that huge opening. And pick it up on the other side. Here she is. That's all you got to do. Okay, so we have the harness from here coming out, and we have the fused plug that goes to the car harness. And we're going to put these two together. Okay? And that's all you got to do. And then we're going to tuck that back in out of the way. And we're going to put our little cover back on. Bottom first. Then push the top on. Make sure it's locked in good. Okay? And we are done. We're just going to put her back. Before I put her back, though, I put a wire tie on this cable. I don't want it all hanging in there. See how I just made a figure 8 and I put a little wire tie? So then we're going to put this back in there. Fits right in. And we're going to screw her back on. Okay? And now we can plug in our air compressor and turn her on. And turn her off. We can plug in our iPhone charger. See how she's blue? Turn her on. Okay? The reason I wanted to have the switch was because I wanted to be able to shut it off when I don't want to use her no more. Okay? On. You can see she came on. Off. She's off. Now, if it's taking you a couple of hours to do this, it's not going to have any power because the truck turned the power off, okay? So what you want to do is turn the truck on and then turn the key off, and we've set the time limit for this for, I think it's an hour and a half, okay? So if you turn it all on and you get no power, make sure you turn the truck on and then turn the truck back off, and that'll give you the power here for another hour and a half, okay? All right. Well, that's basically the end of this video. Now, I am going to add a light here and bed rail lights, okay? If you don't want to do that and you just want these two power sources, you have a great day. Thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you soon. Please do me a favor and subscribe, hit the like button, place a comment, share the video, and if you are interested in how to wire the lights, part 2 of this video will be linked in the description, and it will be on my channel, okay? You guys have a great day.